The North Carolina pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. The pork industry contributes more than $10 billion a year to our state's economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs, primarily in small rural communities across eastern North Carolina. Learn more at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner for the North Carolina Sports Network. Welcome to another week of the Old North State Tailgate. I'm Chris Edwards. Thanks for joining us this week, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're watching or listening to us now, whether that be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or iHeart. We certainly appreciate your support and hope that you'll tell your friends about our podcast too. Got a great week coming up on the North Carolina Sports Network today. The Glenn Show, 9 a.m. on Thursday. This week, DG will chat with UNC head coach Mack Brown. Our Wild Dogs and Hogs, 9 a.m. on Friday. This week, featured guest, NFL quarterback guru and UNC football volunteer analyst Clyde Christensen. And later today, Mike Waddell and Jimmy Collins will sit down in our show with Duke cornerback Brandon Johnson. All right, let's get into it. Time to break the huddle, presented by the original Saltworks. All right, DG, let's start with last week. We'll start with the big one in Durham. Duke and Notre Dame Blue Devils come up just a little bit short.
Yeah, it was great to see that Duke, just as a community, took advantage of that historic trip of ESPN's Game Day to their campus. It's only been in our state 9 times. It only comes to the biggest games, or one of the biggest games in the entire country. And it was not only the lure of Notre Dame, of course, a long-term juggernaut when it comes to TV ratings. It was a really good Duke football team that had shocked the world on national TV in early September by taking out those Clemson Tigers. So I thought the environment was great. The buildup was great. The fans were great. The players were great. And the reality is, Duke showed resilience, man. Notre Dame was up 13-zip in that game midway through the third quarter, and the Devils hadn't been able to run it, hadn't been able to throw it. But as they've shown in these 2 years under Mike Elko, man, they just kept plugging away. And Riley Leonard, before his unfortunate injury, made plays with his arm and with his legs. And the Blue Devils took that lead. And it took former Wake star Sam Hartman leading a 95-yard drive late in the fourth quarter for the Irish to get that victory in Durham. So to me, it really emblazoned the Irish as a legit top 10 team, but it also certified the Blue Devils as a legitimate top 25 team, especially if Riley Leonard can get healthy in the coming weeks.
One of the games we were at last week with our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, Louisville comes on the road last Friday, beats NC State 13-10. Again, the Wolfpack looking stagnant on offense.
Yeah, it's one thing to lose to a Louisville team that is now 5-0. That's not embarrassing, but it is embarrassing to faceplant offensively with UVA transfer Brennan Armstrong at the controls. Credit to the Wolfpack defense. Peyton Wilson affected that game as much as any linebacker you'll ever see in college football. He was a heat-seeking missile. He was honoring former Wolfpack defensive stalwart Bill Cowher as the Wolfpack Nation, I thought, also rose to the moment on national TV in that Friday night game. They did all the right things. The uniforms looked great, glow in the dark and otherwise. But when your line is struggling and you don't have a star tailback, and your best wide receivers are young, and Brennan Armstrong, even as a very experienced guy, is really still not a super accurate passer and tossed a couple of really bad interceptions. When none of the parts are working offensively at a high level, obviously the sum of those parts is not going to be very good either. And all of this, of course, led to Dave Doran's announcement days later that MJ Morris, the sophomore quarterback, is going to take over starting duties from Brennan Armstrong.
All right, nice bounce-back win for App State. They beat Louisiana Monroe 41-40. App with that win after that tough loss at Wyoming.
Yeah, the important thing here to remember, I think, in the big picture is that Sean Clark, the App State head coach, needs a winning season. And when you look at how hard the Mountaineers' schedule gets at the end of this regular season, they just couldn't afford to lose this game at Louisiana Monroe. And there's Michael Hughes, their junior place kicker. This is the guy, remember, that 1 week ago was trying to convert a field goal that gets blocked and returned for a touchdown, and Wyoming shocks the Mountaineers in a game that App ends up losing, of course. Well, Michael Hughes asked to kick one of the most difficult field goals of his career. That was a 54-yarder. And remember, the game was not tied when he kicked that field goal. It was either the Mountaineers lose or the Mountaineers win. That was it. The guy hits that 54-yarder, as he's done. He did it last year. Remember, he kicked the game winner at Texas A&M. Now, it wasn't a long one, but that's a couple of nice things to have on your resume as a junior kicker. Michael Hughes may have saved the Mountaineers season. I don't know how good the Mountaineers are overall, but that was a clutch road win under difficult circumstances. You know, App State has only had 2 non-winning seasons in the last 30 years. So Sean Clark can't go 6-6 again. That was a huge victory. The Mountaineers are 1-0 in Sun Belt play, right? Long way to go in conference season. And they have a great chance, if you look at their schedule, to get to 7-2 before they face that more difficult stretch to close the regular season.
One of the teams that is really struggling right now that really needs some wins in order to have a winning season is East Carolina. Pirates go on the road. They lose at Rice 24-17. Serious questions about Mike Houston's team.
Yeah, this reminds me in some ways of the NC State story because the Pirates are actually playing pretty good defense most weeks, but their offense just continues to let them down. And we've talked a little bit about this. Mike Houston is in year 5, where expectations are higher and the benefit of the doubt is lower among most in the fan base. The Pirates fall to 1-4. It is getting harder and harder to picture a bowl invitation for the 3rd year in a row for Mike Houston, and that obviously has some folks growling there. There's no doubt that Mike Houston can coach, Chris. You and I have seen what he did at Lenoir-Rhyne, the Citadel. He took James Madison to 3 straight top 10 finishes, including 1 FCS national championship. Those are all on his resume. But he's never been at a single school as long as he's been at ECU. And once you're there for 5 years, of course, you're playing with your own guys. And that puts the spotlight on Mike Houston, the recruiter, more than Mike Houston, the coach, that we know he can handle those duties. Holton Ahlers has moved on. Other star players recruited by his predecessor have moved on. Now it's his guys. And again, the defense looks pretty solid. But when you take out the Pirates' defensive touchdowns, ECU's offense against its 4 FBS opponents, put aside Gardner-Webb for a sec, 12 points per game. That is about as bad as it gets in FBS level football for an offense. The line hasn't played well. The quarterback play has been a massive drop-off from the Holton Ahlers years. And it's trouble city. I'm looking forward to our trip to Greenville for that SMU visit on Thursday night for the national TV game on ESPN. But as close as the Pirates were at Rice, just like they were in it in the 4th quarter against Marshall, they just can't get the plays offensively when they need them. And Mike Houston has an offensive conundrum on his hands.
Elon 14, William & Mary 6. The Phoenix knock off another top 10 team. Good win for Elon at home last week.
Yeah, the Phoenix became an FCS program almost 25 years ago, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Tony Trisciani's win over the top 5 tribe of William & Mary is one of the biggest victories in that program's history. The tribe is really well coached by Mike London. They had a top 10 national finish and a conference title last year. They came to town playing great defense and creative offense. And the Phoenix showed that perseverance like I was talking about in the Blue Devils Fighting Irish game. We were there. I mean, it was hard for either team to get first downs, much less touchdowns. And this game was 6-0 William & Mary entering the 4th quarter. And Matthew Downing, the Phoenix quarterback, who's actually formerly of Georgia, formerly of Texas Christian, formerly of Louisiana Tech. He's one of those 4 schools in 6 years type guys. He came through with 2 4th quarter touchdown passes against a William & Mary defense that had not allowed a touchdown of any kind, run or throw, in its previous 3 games. One of the guys we highlighted a week ago, Chandler Brayboy, who was really good against Wake Forest, and Elon's lost in the opener. He had 3 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown. He also had a 25-yard run from his slot or wide receiver position. A lot to celebrate there. And Tony Trisciani, this is actually his 8th win over a ranked opponent in his 5 years as the head coach of the Phoenix. So a lot going right now at Elon. They have jumped into one of the top 25 FCS polls. And it feels like our state is populating those polls quite nicely right now.
One final game we're going to talk about in our opening segment. How about the big win for North Carolina Central in overtime? They beat Campbell 49-48. The Eagles down in that game 35-21. They outscored Campbell 21-7 in the second half to force overtime and win.
North Carolina Central head coach Trey Oliver actually sought out and found on social media folks who had tweeted, hey, when NC Central finally plays somebody in its weight class, they can't live up to the standard. People were tweeting that when it was 35-14 Campbell, but the game was, barely at halftime. Mm-hmm. Well, he clearly has an eye for such slights. He gave two of that double eyeball emoji.
The look emoji.
Yes, calling out those who questioned his Eagles because they did score right at the end of the first half to make it 35-21. And as we've said all season long, remember, Central has one of the best players in school history at quarterback in Davius Richard. He led the comeback with his legs, with his arms against a Campbell team that also has a good quarterback and obviously also puts up some nice offensive numbers under Coach Mike Minter. But you want to talk about halftime adjustments, whatever Trey Oliver did, down 35-21, it was all Eagles in the second half of that game. And that means Central rises to its highest ranking in school history as an FCS program. They're number 11 now after that comeback overtime victory against the Camels. And for those who missed it, the Eagles place kicker, Adrian Olivo, he had a 34-yard field goal to win the game on the last play of regulation, and he missed it. Fast forward, and the Campbell PAT was missed in overtime. So the same guy, Olivo from Central, gets a chance for a walk-off PAT, which is not something you see very often. But he got that one through the uprights. Camels scored only one touchdown in the second half, and NC Central has a chance at one of its best seasons in school history.
All right, coming up in our next segment, Mike Waddell and Coach Jimmy Collins chat with Duke Nickelback Brandon Johnson. And as we go into break, here are all the scores from last week's games involving North Carolina college football teams with our Jimmy's scoreboard right here on the Old North State Tailgate. The original Saltworks has been serving the Wilmington area for over 50 years. Owner Bob Hubbard and his staff create a welcome atmosphere to go along with their home-cooked breakfast and lunch that simply cannot be rivaled anywhere in North Carolina. Pancakes, eggs, waffles, hot dogs, crab cakes, and the best grits in the state. The original Saltworks, a proud partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. The oldest restaurant in New Hanover County has a brand new look, feel, and taste, making it the #1 place for great food in Wrightsville Beach. Owner Jimmy Galeese and his wife Keaton have poured their hearts and soul into the reformation of this North Carolina coastal classic restaurant, and the impact has been fantastic. King Neptune serves fresh fish, chicken, and steak, and has an amazing wine and spirits to lift your dining experience to make it the best at the beach. Come taste the creations of Chef Chavez, and you'll know that you have tasted a little bit of heaven right there in Wrightsville Beach. That's King Neptune. Call them at 910-239-3055 and make your reservation now. King Neptune in Wrightsville Beach, a proud partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. Welcome back to the Old North State Tailgate presented by NC Pork. Now this Saturday we're going to be at the UNC Syracuse game on Franklin Street at the United Methodist Church on the lawn facing Franklin Street from 12:30 to 3. Make sure you come out and see us with our Old North State Tailgate coming up on Saturday in Chapel Hill. Okay, now time for our hot reads of the week presented by Lawson Insurance and High Street Insurance Partners. Deion Sanders in Colorado, they continue to be one of the most watched teams in college football. And DG really surprised a lot of people last week with the way they hung with Southern Cal.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, Colorado football has mostly not mattered for a quarter century at this point. What was the most watched game this past weekend, even after, remember, Oregon had destroyed the Buffaloes the previous week in a highly publicized and very watched game as well? It was Southern Cal against Colorado. It was 7+ million viewers, most in college football last weekend. That makes the Buffaloes 5 for 5 in being among the most watched games in all of college football. And again, those who think Deion is all hype and no substance, I remind them 2 of the best players on his team are his own sons, so he must be doing something of substance right at home. I also remind them that they took the USC Trojans all the way down to a one-possession matchup, and that's the highly ranked Trojans against the Buffaloes team that could have been completely deflated after being humiliated by the Oregon Ducks. Deion is doing a lot right. Deion is doing things that are very hard to do and rare at a program like Colorado. There is substance beyond the obvious neon Deion hype, and I just give him a lot of credit. It is really hard. Look at our state. We don't have lower profile programs being among the most watched in America very often. Duke's in the process of doing it right now under Mike Elko, but it's rare that it happens. And Deion deserves a tip of the cap for making it happen in a really short time at Colorado.
All right, speaking of Duke, now despite the loss to the Irish, the Blue Devils really celebrated all of Saturday with game day's visit. They acquitted themselves very well during the game, and I just thought it was a great day for Duke to showcase what Duke football is all about.
I agree with you. This is something that the first time game day came to North Carolina soil, it's been around for 30+ years as a traveling circus. I was there in 1997 when UNC hosted Florida State. They were both undefeated. It was November. They were both ranked in the national top 5. It was called the biggest regular season game in ACC football history. Not only was the game good, low scoring, kind of like Notre Dame Duke, but very entertaining, lots of talent on the field. The Seminoles did beat the Tar Heels, Bobby Bowden over Mac Brown Part 1. But the hype, Chapel Hill is famous as a college basketball town. We all know that. But what did Franklin Street look like? What did Kenan Stadium sound like? It was as good as I've experienced in my 30+ years doing this stuff. Fast forward to this year, I think Duke lived up to the hype in all of those same ways. If you had told me, Chris, back in August, that the Blue Devils on Labor Day night on national TV would look similar to Clemson athletically, not better than, but in the same neighborhood, and then you told me less than a month later on national TV with game day in town, they would be as physical as Notre Dame. I'm telling you, I could live to 100, and I would have told you, no, Duke will never have a football team that is both in a similar class as Clemson athletically and in a similar class as Notre Dame in terms of physicality. Guess what? Mike Elko in his second year has a team that fits both of those descriptions. One, a monumental upset of Clemson. One, a disappointing but very close nail-biter defeat against the Fighting Irish. The buildup, the game, the aftermath, asterisk on Riley Leonard's health, obviously moving forward. It was a historic visit by game day, but it still has a chance, even with the loss, to be an historic time for Duke football, which has finished in the national top 25 only one time in the last 60 years. They still, despite the loss to the Irish, have a legit chance to do that as long as Riley Leonard responds and heals quickly from what looked like a pretty nasty high ankle sprain.
Well, the Blue Devils are just one of the many North Carolina teams having phenomenal seasons. UNC 4-0, Duke, of course, 4-1, both in the top 25 of FBS football. At the FCS level, we talked about North Carolina Central and Elon, their wins. Western Carolina in the top 25. And how about Lenore Ryan? They're number 13 in the D2 poll. They're 5-0. It's a great time to celebrate all football in North Carolina.
I'm with you on that. And one question I used to get, Chris, I hosted a statewide show, heard in more than 300 North Carolina cities and towns for more than a decade. And because we had callers from literally 300+ North Carolina cities and towns and regular listeners, I would often get asked, what sports do these fans in North Carolina love the most? And one thing I often had to admit, as much as I didn't want to admit it, was that the month of October often had a huge chunk of fans ready to turn the page to college basketball or the NBA or the NHL or whatever else was on their radar. Why? Because we didn't have enough football teams that were still interesting in the month of October or the month of November. Well, sure as heck, Carolina at 4-0 is interesting. Sure as heck, Duke at 4-1, especially after what they did last year, extremely interesting. I don't know how often we've had three of the best teams in the FCS ranks, but it's not often. And Central could win the HBCU National Championship again. Elon is for real. We've been talking about Western Carolina, best season in a long, long time. I mean, maybe my lifetime, as a possibility at least. And the Catamounts have a big game we'll talk about later in today's program. You mentioned undefeated Lenoir-Rhyne. There's only two undefeated teams left at any level in our state, meaning college sports. And it's Lenoir-Rhyne in Division II, and it's Carolina as the Tar Heels host Syracuse this weekend. That's a lot of worthy conversation as the calendar has already turned to October. And that, frankly, makes it a whole lot more fun for everybody here in North Carolina. All that other stuff, NFL, NHL, college basketball, we're looking forward to it too, and some of it is already here. But let's keep college football central to the conversation for at least another month or more.
All right, time to go for our Sport Clips MVP of the week, presented by Sport Clips. Mike Waddell and Coach Jimmy Collins sitting down with Duke Nickelback, Brandon Johnson.
Mike Waddell along with Jim Collins, and we're joined by the preseason All-ACC Nickelback out of Newton, North Carolina for the Duke Blue Devils. We're talking about Brandon Johnson. And Brandon, how are you, young man? You've gotten off to a great start here in 2023.
I'm doing well. Can't complain at all.
Let's talk about you. Now, you come out of a great football area in Catawba County. Now, I'm biased because I'm from there too. But I've got to ask you, you are a Newton Conover Red Devil. And now you are a Duke Blue Devil. Your arch rival in high school was Maiden, and they are the Blue Devils. So do you have problems when you go home trying to wear the Blue Devil stuff around your Red Devil brothers?
Honestly, I probably represent Duke most of the time. It might be at first it was a little hard putting on that blue, but you know, I'm a Red Devil at heart, but I love to represent Duke whenever I go back home.
You have gotten off to an outstanding start, as we said, already 22 tackles this year, 4.5 tackles for loss. Now, Coach is a defensive guy. Our name of our midweek show that we do outside of this is called Wild Dogs and Hogs. I like the big guys because I'm a big guy. Yep. Coach likes the people like you who are wild dogs. You just get after it. 4.5 tackles for loss. You are on a rampage. What did you do to get ready for this campaign with Duke, along with your Blue Devil teammates that has made it so electric, turning Duke into a football school?
Yeah, so the main thing is just making sure we practice hard every single day, running to that football. That's something that we emphasize. And we know if we play hard, we play with effort, the plays will come to us. We'll make the plays. And that it just shows on the field.
Well, you know what? It does show on the field. And I've been very impressed with the way you guys have played over the last 2 years since Coach Elko has been there. And without a doubt, you play with great effort and you play with great toughness. Tell me a little bit about what your role as the Nickelback is. I know you're covering the slot. You're involved in the blitz packages and doing things like that. Elaborate on those things a little bit, if you would, Brandon.
Yeah, so I say my role playing nickel, making sure, number one, nobody catches the ball, playing man-to-man coverage, and making the plays that I'm supposed to make. So it might be a little bit of mix-up whenever I'm in the box here and there. Main thing, setting the edge of the defense, making sure nobody get outside of me. So that's really the role that I play. And then being a leader on the field, always communicating, always having good energy, making sure that the team stays together through adversity.
Well, I've noticed as I've watched you play here that you're a guy that pressures a lot off the edge. That's how you get all the tackles for losses, and I noticed you have career sacks in there also, which is very impressive. Let me ask you this, Brandon: what percentage do you guys play some form of man-to-man?
I say Coach does a good job mixing it up, about 50-50. Depends on the game plan, honestly. But I say this year we're running a lot more man-to-man concepts because we do have a talented back end that can really cover. So Coach trusts us to go out there and cover guys man-to-man.
Are you playing any of the hot thing in college football right now and in pro football is the origination of the coverage package with Nick Saban. We call it Rip Liz match. Are you guys playing any Rip Liz match or anything like that?
Yeah, so we'll on third down, we'll throw in a extra DB here and there just to get the coverage package in, and then that also allows me to blitz off the edge whenever we are able to add another defensive back in.
Now your 3-down stuff. That's out of your 3-down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. You guys are playing so well. It's exciting to watch you play. You play with great effort, and it's really, really, really fun as an old defensive coach to watch you play.
Thank you.
Now, your mom and dad are both athletes as well. Wayne and Alonda, both Lenore-Rhyne University Bears. Your father playing football, your mom playing basketball. I recently watched a video on Instagram, and they showed these little tiny kid football players in an Oklahoma drill against their moms. Now, if you matched up with your mom back when you were playing Pee Wee football back in Newton Conover, who would have gotten the best of that exchange? Would your mom have taken it easy on you, or would she have tried to run right through you?
Definitely would have tried to run right through me. We're a competitive family. Coming from a sports family and sports background, it was always competition, whether it was basketball or any sport. But my mom definitely not taking anything easy on me. But I like to say that I come out with the W.
I like that confidence. And when you talk about playing multiple sports, did you play multiple sports growing up? And if you did, was that a big reason why you've been able to excel and keep growing as an athlete and improving?
Oh, I would say so for sure. Playing football, basketball, running track growing up, and even as a tiny kid playing whatever sport that had a ball involved, really. I love sports ever since I was a little kid. So sports has always been my thing, and playing multiple sports and learning in multiple sports how to just be a good teammate and things like that definitely has carried me to this point.
Outside of your mom and dad, who made an impact on you as a young athlete and as a scholar? Because, you know, we're talking mainly about your athletic prowess here today, but you're at Duke University. You're going to have a degree when you graduate from one of the top universities in the world. So you have to have multiple folks who have made an impression on you. Brandon Johnson, who have been your role models?
Yeah, so obviously my mother and my father, but outside of my mother and my father, who always pushed me in sports and in school, my older brother was a good role model when it came to the academics because he got a full ride scholarship academically to go to Chapel Hill. And that was an inspiration for me to just do well in school, and that it's possible to also excel in sports and excel in academics. And other than my mother and father in sports, I'd say I had some coaches growing up who really pushed me and really cared for me. And they let me know that, you know, it's possible to be great in athletics and academics coming from where we come from.
You have a proud tradition, obviously, in the family, but you just gave us some intel right there. Your brother went to Chapel Hill. So on November 14th, and we're looking ahead a little bit, and tell the people that Duke, we just talked about, you know, NC State coming up in your next game after this open week. But when Carolina and Duke played, did you grow up a Duke fan or a Carolina fan? And how do you mesh those emotions at home with your brother?
Yeah, so growing up, before my brother got to college at Chapel Hill, I definitely say I was a Carolina fan growing up. Watching basketball, just being a part of, you know, being from North Carolina, like UNC, that Carolina Blue was just what I grew up on. But it was a house divided for sure whenever I committed to Duke, and he was at Chapel Hill, and it was Duke all the way from that point.
And now you're getting ready for North Carolina State in your next game. But this week you have an open date. This has certainly been an incredible start to the 2023 season. You have an incredible 7-tackle performance against Clemson in that Labor Day night opening win. And then another huge game against Notre Dame this past weekend that didn't go the Blue Devils' way, but still a lot to build on from that. What will you take out of this bye week and apply towards the Blue Devils that maybe you didn't have in your arsenal heading into that game against Notre Dame? What are you working on during the off week?
Yeah, for sure. So the main thing is just learning. Even though we lost, you can always learn, and there's always lessons to be learned, and that's something that Coach Santucci preaches to the defense. And definitely 2 minute, making sure just being in those big time situations, coming out on top. So the next time that we're in that situation, we know how to handle it and we get the opposite outcome.
Brandon, tell me about your Duke experience from an academic standpoint. What are you majoring in? What's your favorite class there? Because having been there for so long, like I was, I very much understand the pressures that you're under each and every day, academically, football-wise, et cetera. So tell us a little bit about your academic experience at Duke.
Yeah, so I'm majoring in sociology and I'm getting a certificate in MMS, which is marketing management studies. So that'll be good for business and whatever I want to do after college. But the experience on campus and with academics was definitely something that I had to adjust to, being a student athlete. But it's been great, honestly. I've adjusted well, been here for about 3 years now, and it's nothing short of amazing. I have tutors and I have coordinators who go to battle for me, and they go out of their way to make sure that I have all of the help that I need, but also while making sure that I'm learning properly, you know.
Well, Duke does put a lot of stress on you, but the one thing that you know as a Duke student, you go to class and you work at it, then you're going to end up with a great degree. A lot of people out there may not understand when you use the word certificate that at a lot of schools they refer to that as a minor. At Duke, it's called a certificate. Just to explain that real quickly. The other thing, one last point here, and I've been very impressed with the way your team looks physically. Tell me about your strength coach and your training program, because I'm very, very impressed with what I hear about Coach Feely.
Yeah, Coach Philly, great human being, great coach. And one thing about Coach Philly, he's never going to change. He's always going to stay the same. And I think that's something that rubs off on the team, being consistent, because that's a thing that most teams have to have if you want to be great. You have to do what you do at a high level all the time. It can never let off. And that's one thing that Coach Philly preaches to us. He pushes us hard every single day. We live in season, out of season, and the guys don't complain about it because we know that's what it takes to be great, and that's what it takes to have a great football team.
That's just a tremendous attitude, and that attitude bleeds over into the entire team, and it's really, really impressive to watch you play, your physical ability, your physical appearance.
Thank you.
And I'm very impressed with your program and what's going on there, and very impressed with your play.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Brandon, Jimmy talks to you about how you look physically. I want to talk about how the Duke football team looks in those uniforms, because the threads are looking pretty sharp these days. How do you guys decide which helmet, which jersey, and which pant that you wear when you come out on the field every Saturday?
Yeah, so we have a group of guys who get together, come our leadership council. They get together and they chat every week about what uniform combo we decide to wear home or away. But, big guy, Coach Elko, he has the final say on what we wear.
We talked to Dwayne Carter here on the North Carolina Sports Network a few weeks ago, and then he got a touchdown. So we're expecting a pick six or a scoop and score from you coming up against NC State. One final question. I've noticed this a lot in college football today more than back in the day when your dad and your mom and I were growing up and playing, when Jimmy was playing at E-Line. When you got your number, you kind of stuck with it. These days, people are changing numbers, and you've gone from number 30 to number 3. How did you come to the conclusion to get number 3? Did that have a special meaning?
Oh, for sure. 3 was my first ever football number, so that number has a lot of meaning to me. When I first started playing this game, that was the first number I ever had. I switched a couple times growing up. I went from 3 to 4. I went to 2, and then finished off high school wearing number 3. So 3's just been my number. And then when I got to college, they assigned me 30, but I was happy because it had 3 in it. And then I was just happy that I had 3 in my number. And then when I got the opportunity to change my number back to 3, it was a no-brainer. I had to take it. Another thing about number 3, I got to shout out my twin brother. We're 3 minutes apart, so that's why I wear the number. It means a lot to me. I always know he's with me when I'm on the field.
Brandon Johnson of Duke University, Blue Devil football. Good luck for the rest of the season, and thanks a lot for joining us here on the Old North State Tailgate.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
When we come back, David and I will go inside our XL Moving and Storage Big 4 Games of the Week. That's next on the Old North State Tailgate, presented by the North Carolina Pork Council. Sport Clips is like no other place you've ever gotten your haircut. Sports everywhere. TVs everywhere playing sports. and Guy Smart stylists who know how to give you the haircut you want and the haircut you need. You don't ever need an appointment. Walk-ins are welcome, and you'll walk out feeling like an MVP, guaranteed. Be sure to ask about the MVP experience, as it's something you just can't put into words. Awesome haircut, hot steam towel, invigorating shampoo, neck and shoulder treatment. It takes a haircut and turns it into an event. Sport Clips, a proud partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
A-G-G-I-E, B-R-I-D-E, what? Give me that, give me that, give me that, give me that, what? I said A-G-G-I-E, what? B-R-I-D-E, what? Give me that, give me that, give me that, give me that.
The oldest restaurant in New Hanover County has a brand new look, feel, and taste, making it the #1 place for great food in Wrightsville Beach. Owner Jimmy Galeese and his wife Keaton have poured their hearts and soul into the reformation of this North Carolina coastal classic restaurant, and the impact has been fantastic. King Neptune serves fresh fish, chicken, and steak, and has an amazing wine and spirits to lift your dining experience to make it the best at the beach. Come taste the creations of Chef Chavez, and you'll know that you have tasted a little bit of heaven right there in Wrightsville Beach. That's King Neptune. Call them at 910-239-3055 and make your reservation now. King Neptune in Wrightsville Beach, a proud partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. Welcome back to the Old North State Tailgate, presented by the NC Port Council, Chris Edwards and David Glenn. Don't forget, on Saturday we'll be at the UNC Syracuse game right there on Franklin Street at the University United Methodist Church on the lawn facing Franklin Street from 12:30 to 3 on Saturday. Come out and join us. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're watching or listening to: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or iHeart. We really appreciate the support. All right, now let's get into our XL Moving and Storage Big Four games of the week, and we'll start with the big classic down in the Big 12. Going to be an SEC matchup soon. Oklahoma and Texas, the Red River rivalry. DG, they've been meeting since 1900, one of the oldest college football rivalries in our country.
Yeah, how do you like this fun fact, Chris? Oklahoma was not even yet a state in 1900. How about that, right? And one more for you. They weren't yet called the Longhorns at Texas, and they weren't yet called the Sooners at Oklahoma. That's how long ago this rivalry was started, and it is one of the better in America. The fans could have their own opinion. You could chime in with yours if you want. But when college football coaches were asked a few years ago by a media outlet, what are the best rivalries in all of college football? The three most frequent answers were Michigan, Ohio State, Army, Navy, and Texas, Oklahoma. And this year's Sooners-Longhorns matchup, because they've been more down than up compared to when both were winning a bunch of national championships, including the Longhorns under Mac Brown in 2005, remember. They've been good often, just not great often in that time period. They're both 5-0. And the computers that follow such things say that the winner of this Oklahoma-Texas matchup has a 70% chance of ending up in the 4-team college football playoff. The loser, only a 30% chance. So since they're both 5-0, this is still the same state fair for those who don't know. Dallas is not quite equidistant, but it's a similar drive from Norman, Oklahoma, where OU is located, and Austin, Texas, where UT is located. It is literally the state fair. So imagine our state fair in Raleigh, just with a football game with 90,000 plus people dropped in the middle of it. Brent Venables, the former Clemson defensive coordinator, is in year 2 as the head coach of the Sooners. They were not good last year. In fact, the Longhorns trounced them last year 49-0. So there's going to be a revenge factor, and OU is way better than it was last year. Texas is legit as well. They are expecting 90,000 plus again. Of course, they are going to keep playing each other as members of the SEC. But the fact that they're both undefeated, the fact that they both have good quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers of the Longhorns, Former UCF quarterback Dylan Gabriel is now leading the Sooners. It's going to be a much more even matchup. Longhorns favored by 7. I like Texas to win, but this is the game of the weekend in college football with all sorts of national title repercussions.
All right, let's turn to games in our backyard now. We talked about it earlier. We're going to be in Chapel Hill this weekend with our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus at the University United Methodist Church there on Franklin Street from 12:30 to 3. Come out and see us. North Carolina hosting Syracuse. Tar Heels off a bye, so we'll see if North Carolina got healthier. They're obviously playing really well. But it feels to me, DG, like this is an elimination game for Syracuse from an ACC title perspective after that loss at home to Clemson last week.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you know that if you go 8-0 in ACC play, you'll be in the ACC title game, of course.
Sure.
But if you go 7-1, it certainly looks that way as well, given that Clemson already has 2 losses. So the Orange has only the one, as you said, that lost to a very good and improving Clemson team just last week. The twist in this one that I think might surprise some folks is that I think it's not just 1, but 2 of the 5 best quarterbacks in the ACC. Everybody knows about Drake May, of course. His numbers aren't what they were last year, but he's still a winning quarterback who can hurt you with his arm and legs. Fun fact, Drake May is a product of Myers Park High School in Charlotte, North Carolina. Garrett Schrader of Syracuse, who is running it really well and throwing it fairly well, is from Charlotte Christian High School. So it's just a fun wrinkle that 2 of the better quarterbacks in this league are right here from the Queen City in our backyard. And whereas Drake May's story is well told and well known, Garrett Schrader sounds crazy. He looks like a pocket passer. He's like 6'4", 225. Riley Leonard is slightly smaller, so you're not as surprised that he's a dual threat quarterback. Garrett Schrader is in the top 10 rushers in the Atlantic Coast Conference and throwing the ball well. Clemson was the only opponent of the Orange that actually got to the passer, prevented Schrader from running the way he likes to. So Gene Chizik will try to do that with the Tar Heels. Easier said than done. This is a really big challenge for Carolina, maybe the toughest of the Tar Heels' 5 opponents so far. I like the Heels at home. Carolina's an 8-point favorite, but Syracuse is playing great defense right now, and it's going to be up to Drake May and his cast of skill players to disrupt that Syracuse defense the way Clemson was able to at times last week.
So we go from 2 of the best quarterbacks in the ACC to one of the biggest quarterback question marks in the ACC. Marshall and NC State. We talked about NC State and their loss to Louisville last week, prompting Dave Doran now to make the switch at quarterback. They'll go with MJ Morris. Remember, he won some big games for the Wolfpack last year in a reserve role. So we'll see MJ Morris this week when NC State hosts Marshall.
Rhetorical question. When is the last time you saw Wolfpack coach Dave Doran do exactly what the fans on social media were begging and demanding that he does? I mean, it doesn't happen often. I can promise you that. And of course, he's not doing this just because of the fans' uproar. He's in his 11th year. He's kind of been there, done that, and he's doing things because he thinks it gives his team a better chance to win. That's the bottom line. I would say 2 quick things about MJ Morris. In fairness to him, he's only played a lot of snaps in 3 games in his life. He was pretty good, not elite, but pretty good last year in wins over Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. He was not good in a Wolfpack game against Boston College. So let's not expect him to be Phillip Rivers, as he's thrown back into the fire. The other part of it, whereas I do believe MJ Morris will give them a lift, the Pack's offensive line has not played well. The Pack has had injuries and attrition at running back. The Pack has young wide receivers. The same problems that surrounded Brennan Armstrong are going to surround MJ Morris. Again, I think they're going to find the spark that they need, in part because I know this may sound strange, I don't think Marshall is very good. I know they're 4-0. I'm aware of their record. They were in a nail-biter against ECU in the 4th quarter in Greenville. They barely beat ODU last week. This is not a freight train undefeated Marshall team. The Wolfpack's defense can and I believe will exploit the Thundering Herd's offense, and then we'll see what happens with MJ Morris. But the Wolfpack's season has gone from one of just that feeling of misery surrounding it to at least the feeling of hope. And that gives them a chance to rally around MJ Morris and build on their strong defense and special teams and maybe still turn it into a good
All right,
season.
the last game we're going to talk about in our Big Four games this week, a big FCS matchup, Western Carolina, number 17 this week, taking on 20th ranked Chattanooga, a chance for this special season for the Catamounts to continue.
Yeah, and I won't hesitate to say I told you so, but we have been saying all season that the third-year Western head coach Kerwin Bell has something cooking in Cullowhee. There's no doubt about it. The guy's an offensive guru. He won a D2 national title at Valdosta State. He's recruiting all those Florida guys that we mentioned. He, of course, the former Florida Gators quarterback with all sorts of connections to the Sunshine State, which is a fantastic talent pipeline we've written and talked about for many decades. Whereas Furman is still considered the favorite in the Southern Conference. I believe these are the other two best teams in the Southern Conference. And how about this? Even though Western Carolina and Chattanooga have played each other 49 times now, it's never happened with both of them being ranked going into the game. So it's the number 17 Catamounts at the number 20 Mocs. They're both 4-1. They're both playing really good defense. They're 1-2 in their conference in scoring defense. And the Catamounts, because of that high-powered offense, are leading the Southern Conference by scoring 39 points per game. If you get a chance, quarterback Cole Gonzalez, running back Desmond Reed, these are among the best players in the Southern Conference, if not the FCS. He's got something cooking. It's not going to be easy to beat a top 25 team at their place, obviously. But, man, if the Catamounts can figure out a way to win this one, it really could be the best football season of my lifetime at Western. And at this point, my lifetime is a pretty long stretch.
Let's get into our closing thoughts presented by Organized for Success. We'll start. You want to talk about Wake Forest Clemson? That's a big matchup. I know it's not divisions anymore, but that's an old Atlantic Division matchup right there.
I don't feel good about this one from the Demon Deacons' perspective. Historically, we know this story, right? They've played each other 70 times. It's a 71-year-old ACC now. They've played each other every year. And it's 60 wins for the Clemson Tigers, 9 for the Deacs, and a tie. Mitch Griffiths of Wake is the lowest rated QBR guy among starters in the entire ACC. Dave Clawson is not wrong often about anything, and he's even more rarely often about his own wrong about his own team. He said on our show back in August, if we're not as good as we think we can be, it won't be because of Mitch Griffiths. With all due respect to Coach Clawson, he got that one wrong. Now, maybe Griffiths gets better, and there are other issues on offense, but he's just not been a good quarterback. They desperately miss Sam Hartman now at Notre Dame, of course. Clemson is a lot better than the team that lost at Duke. I actually still think Clemson has the best depth chart in the ACC. Now, they might not make the ACC title game, but they're a really good team. I know Wake's 3-1. I think the Tigers are going to not only win, they have won, I think it is 14 straight, Clemson over Wake Forest. 10 of those wins were by 20 or more points. I think you'll see another Clemson victory that fits that description this weekend.
We'll close it out with one of the big FCS matchups this week, NC Central and Elon, a couple of teams coming off some pretty big wins.
Yeah, the Eagles of NC Central at number 11, that is the highest ranking they've ever had as an FCS program. And the Phoenix are also in the top 25 now after that win we described earlier over William and Mary. Central's final 5 games of the regular season are against MEAC opponents. And Central, almost everybody agrees, is the best of the MEAC again this year. So the Phoenix is probably the toughest opponent left in the regular season for an NC Central team that has started 4-1. So I think this is going to be – we were there at Rhodes Stadium last week. The crowd was into it. I would hope they get great attendance again this week with the Phoenix in the top 25. The Phoenix, remember, in first place in their conference. This is a non-conference matchup, obviously, but both want to finish in the national top 10. And to do that, you're really going to need to win this game. So they're kind of standing in each other's way to reach one of their goals. But that's one of the best matchups of the entire we have 2 of the best matchups of the entire FCS schedule this weekend, with Western visiting Chattanooga and NC Central visiting Elon.
All right, that'll do it for us this week. The Old North State Tailgate is an exclusive presentation of the North Carolina Sports Network. Foundational partner, the North Carolina Pork Council. Our executive producer, Mike Waddell. Head of content, David Glenn. And our coordinating producer, Melvin Quitman Jr. Thanks again to all of our special guests. For David Glenn, I'm Chris Edwards, signing off for this edition of the Old North State Tailgate, the official tailgating soundtrack of the 2023 football season, right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.